Coming up next on All About Android, it's just me, Jason Howell. Ron and Win and Flo are out, but we have Matteo Doni joining me. It's been a while, so it's great to have him on. We talk about tablets because the big story this week has been that apparently Google's getting more serious about tablets, Android tablets, again. We'll see what that actually means. Also, Android Auto is getting a cool walk facelift. Once you hear the story, you'll understand what that means. Matteo shows off the Xiaomi 11T Pro 5G, the Realme GT Neo 2, and the Samsung S21 FE in, yes, the hardware shack, because that's back, and a whole lot more, including your email next on All About Android.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This episode of All About Android is brought to you by Streak. Whether you're tracking sales, fundraising, hiring, or support, Streak is a CRM that will help you stay on top of all your processes directly inside Gmail. Get 20% off your first year of their Pro plan, their most popular option, by going to streak.com/AAA. Hello, welcome to All About Android, episode 563, recorded on Tuesday, February 1st, 2022, your weekly source for latest news, hardware, and apps for the Android faithful. I'm Jason Howell, not joined today by Ron Richards, no, not joined today by Wen, also not joined today by Flo, but yes, finally, the return of Matteo Doni. What's up, Matteo?
All great. Thanks for having me back on All About Android. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a little while. And the first, oh, wow. Oh, yeah, by the way, Victor prepped this for you. Happy birthday, Matteo, because your birthday was a few days ago, right?
It was, yes. So this is a fantastic present. Thank you, Victor, and thank you, Team Twit. Having goats, donuts, cakes, and banana for scale, it's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. There you go. See, it ropes it all in. And I think at this point I've realized that, let's say 1 to 1.5% of Victor's job here at Twit is creating personalized bumpers and graphics for you for when you're on. So, he's not overdoing it. That's just a small part of his job, but it exists somewhere in his job description. That's a good thing to know.
Thank you. And thanks to Leo and Lisa for making this possible. Honestly, this is true art, which will endure really the ages.
Yes, chef's kiss. Matteo, of course, frequent visitor to the show, has not been on a little while, but I should say chief mobile opinionist at Tech Travel Geeks. And that's primarily YouTube, right? YouTube.com/Tech Travel Geeks.
Yes, we do also have a website and a few other social channels, but we're focusing on YouTube. That's where we get a lot of engagement. And it's also a platform we think we can give a coverage of gadgets and accessories we think make the travel experience better. And obviously, Android is the most versatile of platforms for people who travel, in our opinion.
Indeed. Sometimes you're even going to find Android like embedded in the entertainment systems on the airplanes and stuff like that. That's how versatile it is. Although, well, I guess more people are traveling now, but the last couple of years hasn't been really great for travel.
It hasn't, but the good thing is that the aircraft that a lot of people travel on have been renewed. They've got rid of the old ones, the clunky ones, and you have new ones with new infotainment systems, new onboard Wi-Fi. And so Android is really quite well used in those contexts.
Yeah, right on. Cool. Well, it's great to get you back, and I'm psyched that we get to have just like a show with just you and I traveling through the world of Android news. And we're going to start our travels not with the news bumper, but we're going to start it with the breaking news bumper. I don't know if Burke was prepared for this, but here we go. Oh, nice little throwback. Okay, we'll go ahead and take that one. That was actually really refreshing to see that old bumper. Just before showtime, I saw Alphabet. Of course, this did happen actually earlier than just before showtime. I just noticed it right before showtime. Alphabet had their earnings today, and as relates to this show, Sundar Pichai talked a little bit about the Pixel and primarily the Pixel 6 and how it's doing. And Sundar said in Q4 we set an all-time quarterly sales record record for Pixel. This came in spite of an extremely challenging supply chain environment. So, sounds like Google's pretty happy with how the Pixel 6 is selling. Matteo, if this is the case, is it because the Pixel 6 is a great phone? Is it because Google is better at marketing it? What do you think would be behind Google? Or maybe they have better partnerships, they're in more stores. What do you think is the driver behind the Pixel 6 being so successful in Google's estimation?
I think it's a mix of everything we said there, but in particular, I think the key thing is that Google is now has a mature brand with the Pixel line of smartphones, and they've got the all-important deals with the carriers. So, for example, my chief aperture officer at Tech Travel Geeks, Lukash, and myself both got Google Pixel 6 Pros. We bought them outright, but my understanding is that here in the UK, the majority of people are getting them as part of their phone contract, and there are some very, very good deals out there. Not only that, they were doing some really good deals for pre-orders in the UK, where if you pre-ordered your Google Pixel 6 or Pixel 6 Pro, you could get a free pair of Bose headphones. And so that was a really big incentive to people here in the UK to pre-order the Google Pixel 6 Pro. And not only that, after years of, let's put it this way, the more enthusiast markets banging on about how great Pixel cameras are and how good the phones are, I think Google has built up that mind share that has enabled them to then make the most of the rest of their marketing spend, and people are more aware of the Pixel brand and they identify it with it at this point.
Yeah, or at least they understand that it exists, and they understand that there is some strength to the Pixel line. You know, even people that I've talked to in my family, you know, that are only tangentially aware that a Pixel phone even exists, would say, "Oh, but I've heard it takes really great pictures," you know, that sort of thing, and that works to Google's favor. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, Pixels sell nothing close to what the biggest names in smartphones are selling, right? So this is a big deal for Google compared to Google, but for Google compared to Samsung, still pretty minor, right? Pretty paltry by comparison.
Definitely. And from a global perspective, it's important to remember that Pixel is only available in certain markets.
Yeah.
There's a whole part of the world where you just can't buy a Pixel. And if you do import one, it suddenly becomes very, very expensive to do so. Right.
Yeah, very, very good point. So yay. I don't know that this necessarily means the Pixel 6 is the best-selling Pixel phone of all time, at least not yet. It's still early, but it's a good start. It's definitely a good start. So we'll see how that rounds out, how that shapes up. All right. With that little amuse-bouche, let's get into the actual news right now.
Well, since Ron's not here to critique my Android news bumper, I'm just going to toss it. I'm tossing it.
You should be very happy that Ron's not here to critique your bumper. I thought that was okay. I thought it was a good one. I'd give you a 6 out of 10.
I think that was
good job.
That was a good one. Though it does take a bit of the enjoyment away without hearing Ron's eyes rolling and seeing him sighing.
Yeah, you can hear those eyeballs swish from one side to the other. You
Victor and I definitely agreed on that, like before the show. Yes, absolutely.
Right on. All right, so top story isn't. Well, I guess it's newsy, but this is a topic that I'm gonna introduce it, and you're gonna be like, really? We're here again? Google and its ambitions with tablets is the top story. Obviously we've talked about Google and tablets and their successes, but probably more importantly, their failures over the years. But we're starting to see multiple clues that show that Google might be getting interested again. Who knows what that leads to? I would say a lot of people aren't very optimistic about where that leads. It might just be a little too late, by comparison to things like the iPad, but we've got some clues. Android 12L, we already know this is the next version of Android. It's kind of a step up version from Android 12, which is already out. Android 12L, from my understanding, has been really designed for larger screen devices, but almost more specifically to foldable devices. But the beauty there is when you unfold a device, sure, there's the foldable aspects that the OS has to adhere to, but then you end up with a really large screen. So maybe there's more incentive to go back in there with Android and kind of make the changes to make it work not only on the foldable, but also on the unfolded large screen, and that translates over to tablets. So we already know, Google's been working hard on that. The beta tests, the beta versions of Android 12L are out there. We're kind of, waiting for the official release of that. But 9to5 Google spotted a job listing for a senior engineer manager in the Android tablet app experience group. And the listing itself says, we believe that the future of computing is shifting towards more powerful and capable tablets. That right there is a big statement coming from Google, who has really been very wishy-washy with tablets. It also says we're working to deliver the next chapter of computing and input by launching seamless support across our platforms and hero experiences that unlock new and better ways of being productive and creative. That could have to do with Chrome OS, and how it interacts with Android. That could have to do with foldables. That could also have to do with tablets, which is what this job listing was for. And a friend of the show, J.R. Raphael from Computer World, also spotted that Rich Miner, who is a co-founder of Android, one of the co-founders of Android, has for the last number of years been busy in Google Ventures and other educational projects at Google, but returned to the Android division as of March 2021 and might actually have some sort of involvement with this kind of like new revitalized push in tablets, and we've seen some of these kind of developments. We've talked on the show about Kids Space, which is like an Android tablet play is like an official Android version of like a kids zone that sometimes you buy other manufacturers' tablets, and they've created these kind of like siloed kid areas. So Android has that. Entertainment Space is another one. I'm curious to know though, like, how do you feel about Google caring about tablets again? Do you think this is? Do you think this leads to a world where Android tablets can actually finally kind of prove themselves as something that people want, or are we too far past this? I mean, I feel like this is really late to learn any lessons about this because we've already kind of made up our minds.
I think there's two ways of looking at this. The first one is from a development standpoint. Google has been a bit fragmented internally about what they thought tablets were. We saw their early efforts with up to the Nexus 9. The tablet experience at Google was okay, but it never really sold well. It was never really sold well to their hardware partners in the Open Handset Alliance. So they didn't really do very well then. And then there seems to have been a shift of effort towards Chrome OS and things like the Lenovo Chromebook tablet or the Chromebook Duet tablet form factor and product package. So Google has really let the actual Android tablet ecosystem go. And companies like Lenovo have stepped in and filled that gap that Google really didn't care about that much. But more importantly, Amazon have really just killed it in the last couple of years with the Amazon Fire tablets. From what I see, a lot of markets in Europe and the US and Canada have done very well with Fire tablets. And especially during the pandemic when people were homeschooling, people really couldn't afford to spend a lot of money on a fruity tablet from Apple. And they ended up buying the whole family Android tablets, which were in fact Amazon Fire tablets. So Google is at this point at a risk of completely losing control of the tablet ecosystem, and forks of Android or their OEMs, ODMs are going to do very well with it. I think they need to put a bit of effort back into it and rein in this sort of sprawling ecosystem they have little control over, and they can't get their services on. For example, on the Amazon tablets, it's quite difficult as a user to get the Google services sideloaded. And for most users, they'll never have them apart from within the Amazon web browser. So I think what Google need to do is obviously improve their tablet ecosystem, but also maybe re-architecture it from the ground up so that they can regain control of it and get Google services and all their media services on it. Because at the moment, they're at risk of losing out on that whole market segment, that whole computing experience, where others have stepped in to fill the gap. So it will be interesting to see, obviously, if they're hiring now for a senior engineering manager for the tablet experience, it'll be at least 18 months before we see some tangible results from this hiring process. It's not something that you do overnight. They have to re-engineer things from the ground up, or they already have a roadmap, but it needs to be implemented.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I had, because the kids space, entertainment space, these are kind of tablet forward kind of changes to Android that happened like a year ago. You know what I mean? So there was some action here, some movement here, at least in that regard. And then Android 12L, it's about larger screen devices. That's already in motion. But I think you're right. This is probably a little ways out. I was trying to do some quick searches to see, like, of all the rumors that we've been hearing about and everything, I think a Pixel tablet is not a rumor that I've really noticed or paid close attention to. But I did a quick search, and yeah, it looks like there was a patent last June that kind of points to the idea of a Google Pixel tablet of some sort. And I haven't really dug into this to really understand like what sets it apart, what's different, what's specific about it. But if Google's putting its efforts into revitalizing its tablet side of its business, I mean, you kind of imagine that there would be a Pixel tablet at some point, especially if they're coming out with a watch at some point, which we've heard a lot about, especially if they're coming out with, a foldable, like we've heard about as well. So heck, there could be all sorts of Pixel devices. And that might be Google's, something Google's really working towards. We want a family of all different, device types, and this would fall into that category. Who knows?
Well, back in the day, we're now talking about 6-7 years ago, Google used to sell itself as build yourself your apps once and make them scalable to all screen sizes, whether that's phones, tablets, and TV screens. I think that they essentially gave up on that after a while. Most of the larger developers were used to having a slightly different release for iPads. So they said, why not do the same for Android? Have one release for phones, one release for tablets. And sadly, it never really took off, the whole scalability of Android, as in having one paradigm for your app user experience that would scale seamlessly, never really happened for most apps. I believe that they're doing a passable job on Chrome OS with the Android runtime on there and having placed the Play Store there. They've kept that alive barely, but things really need to bring others on board to give good experiences and take back that experience that companies like Amazon have really won in. There's so many people using Amazon tablets now. I wouldn't be surprised to see there are more people using Amazon tablets than Android tablets in some markets.
I'd be curious to know that, know that stat as well. Very curious. Well, that's kind of the discussion that I've seen bubbling up a lot is around tablets, but this also just happened as well. Been hearing a little bit here and there about iMessage reactions coming into Google Messages. We've talked about it on the show a number of times. I think it was we first learned about this back in November thanks to some APK teardowns, and then it's just been a matter of like, all right, so seriously, when is this happening? Because I am so sick of getting so and so, the text readout of what a reaction was to my SMS message from an iPhone instead of, it just looks kludgy and wrong. And apparently it's finally rolling out if you are on the beta version. I have it on my phone, but I haven't received any messages from any iMessage devices. But I have the setting. So, and maybe I have the setting. Well, I do have the setting, and I have it on, but maybe it doesn't work because I know some people even have the setting, and it's still not showing in their messages. They're still getting the text readout. But if you want a higher likelihood of actually getting this feature in Google Messages, you should get on the beta track, and you'll get it as soon as anybody. You go into settings, advanced, and you can see a toggle for show iPhone's reaction as emoji. And so there you go. And, some people are going to say, yeah, well, this only really matters in the US because no one else is using SMS. But you know what? That's true. That's very true. How do you feel about this?
I'm just as you said, I think this is a very US-centric problem that Google are trying to solve. This wouldn't be happening without some form of collaboration with Apple, which I hope we see more of going forward. What I will say is that in Europe, iMessage is not really that big of a thing. Obviously, Apple don't have as big a market share in Europe just because of price sensitivity. But most people are using third-party services like Facebook's Messengers app, WhatsApp, and Telegram. So this is really not a problem in Europe and not a big issue in that respect.
Well, I know that if Ron was on right now, and probably Win, and probably Flo actually, they'd all be like giving a big thumbs up because, here in the U.S., we can't shake our addiction to SMS apparently, and so anything that makes it just if we got to be on SMS, anything that makes it just a little bit, suck a little bit less, that is great. I don't know what it's going to take here in the U.S. for everybody to do what everybody's done in other regions, which is to use an entirely different messaging platform in mass. You know what I mean? It's just not happening here as easily.
I find it really amusing because now this is quite scary. It's about 15 years ago. The US was just catching up to Europe when it came to SMS.
Yeah, and I remember that.
There was a significant lag between people using GSM phones in Europe and using SMS, which initially were absolutely free, to then it hitting the carriers in the US and becoming a thing. So we'll see how this plays out. I hope that we get to a place where everyone's using some form of online messenger or database messenger, and there's interchanges between platforms, just the same way as we're seeing iPhone reactions and iMessage reactions coming into the Google Messages app. Yeah. So fingers crossed this will take years, but once
15 years from now, we'll finally be caught up.
Yes, and by then we'll have some form of everything on the blockchain or whatever the buzzword is in 15 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, our phones will be embedded in our eyeballs or something like that. Maybe longer than 15 years. 15 years.
Are you making a joke? Are you making a joke about iPhones?
No, but that's pretty perfect. The new iPhone from Apple, like literally, it's in your eye. I can see it. Anyways, Android Auto is getting a facelift. Yeah, okay, good. I knew of all people you would appreciate my dorky dad jokes. Android Auto is getting a facelift, codenamed Cool Walk. Actually, this article written by someone known fondly on this show as Florence Ion at Gizmodo. This is care of a post, actually, like the initial post was on androidworld.it, which is an Italian Android site. So if you go there, prepare not to easily read it unless you speak and read Italian, which I believe you do, right, Matteo? Am I wrong on that?
I do, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm quite lucky in that. I went to high school in Italy, so yes, I'm quite comfortable with Italian.
So if you're Matteo, go to androidworld.it and don't use Google's automatic translation of everything on the page like I did. Anyways, what does it include? If you're getting this new Android Auto, and we're talking not an app. We're not talking about Android Auto app, right? That's been essentially deprecated at this point. We're talking about if you have a car that has Android Auto running in it and it gets this upcoming update, which is not live yet. So this is still very firmly in the kind of leak sphere. Changes include the status bar is going to disappear. The status bar, the way you're used to seeing it, will disappear. Instead, the Wi-Fi, cell signal, battery indicator, and clock actually appear in the bottom right corner, which to my eyes kind of makes me think of like, I don't know, kind of like a desktop OS of some sort, or like a Chrome OS. Or I don't know. It kind of looks a little old school to me, but I haven't used Android Auto enough to know whether this is a better or a worse solution. I'm not really quite sure. There's also a dedicated button for showing the side panel that's going to go away instead. And I don't like this, so I wonder how it's going to work when it finally releases. A long press of the home button. And something tells me that like the worst thing in the world, like it's one thing when I'm driving to actually have to use a touch screen. I think we've all gotten more used to it than when it happened, because we were used to these tactile buttons that you push it and you know that it goes in and there's a squish factor to it and it registers the command or whatever. Then we got used to touch screens where everything feels the same and you kind of have to pay more attention to it in order to know that you're touching the right place. But then tapping and holding, long pressing on a home button when you're driving, that just doesn't work for me. I don't know, like that just seems like it's going to require more attention, right? Like that almost seems like I need to like look there and keep my finger in the same. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too picky, but what do you think about that? That seems like a disaster to me.
I think it's a disaster, but obviously this is a limited leak.
Yes, totally.
My assumption is here that there will be some sort of mandatory physical button on the steering wheel, as many Android Auto cars have. For example, during the pandemic, my partner Candice and I purchased a car, and one of the discriminatory factors that we had in our car choice was, does it have Android Auto? And ultimately we went for a little Fiat 500 hybrid, which has a 7-inch touchscreen with Android Auto. From my view of what this user interface refresh does, is it makes everything more accessible from a driver's point of view. So having that big microphone button at the bottom makes it easier to reach and tap. And as I said, I'm making a guess here. My assumption is that it will be with some sort of, if you have to long press on a screen without tactile feedback, there must be some sort of button to do that as well.
Hopefully.
I am a very boring driver. I do my best to be very safe. And the whole thing about driving is you need to be aware of what's happening on the road. You need to keep your eyes on the road. So if you don't have that tactile feedback, and it has to be a physical tactile feedback, because there may be other sound in the background, there'll be other noise from the roads, there may be
vibrations in the car. Yeah,
exactly. You need to have that, and so I think what we're seeing now is just a limited leak. I hope we'll see more of this soon, and hopefully more of the existing cars with Android Auto will get the update. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
One of my pet peeves about Android Auto in the Fiat 500 is that for some notifications, you get the toast notification in the top part of the screen. And so you need to actually reach up for it. It's not great in that respect. I would like to see more of the physical buttons. And the way I use Android Auto, it's all use the voice button, trigger the assistant, and get the assistant to do everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then you'll appreciate that the side panel that was hidden before or whatever will actually show assistant cards when the space allows. So that's good. There's one other thing that I got to call out here. They're also testing a cast button, which according to the leak, they're still kind of uncertain as to what it does exactly. I mean, we know what casting is in the Google, kind of ecosystem. It's basically taking what's on one screen and sending it to another, or sending a link from, for the screen or app that you're using to another device so that it can pull it up, that sort of thing. So if there is casting available to take like your phone UI and cast it onto the display in the car, that has some upsides. It also has some downsides. I could totally see somebody casting their YouTube video to that screen. Probably not a good idea if you're driving.
But looking at the way the automotive industry is going and how heavily a lot of governments, especially in Europe, are incentivizing electric vehicles, I think there's a serious problem here that needs to be solved. People are going to often be sitting in their car for about an hour and a half at a time, charging their car at a charging station. And if the car is stationary with its parking mode on, if you're in an automatic,
there you go. Yeah.
You may want to sit there and watch your YouTube videos, catch up on all about Android whilst you're charging your car at the station. Yeah. So I think there's a use case for this, much the same way as when in the current Android Auto, your car is stationary and you're searching for something in Maps, you have the option of a keyboard. The moment the wheels start turning, that option gets taken away and you can only use voice.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Is it context aware to know that, you're parked and the gear is in, neutral or park, as opposed to in drive or whatever. Because I mean, even in my dumb vehicle downstairs, it knows when I'm in drive and so when a text message comes in on that interface, which is not Android Auto or CarPlay, but when it comes in, if it knows that I'm in drive, I cannot interact with it on the screen. I cannot, do certain things. I can only listen to it. So yeah, you're right. It's probably context aware. And that would
it's probably context aware. And let's face it, things like YouTube music, you can cast just audio to the car. So if, for example, someone's in the back and they have the downloaded content that they're maybe wanting to listen to when there's no phone reception, they can cast that content to the car in audio format.
There we go. Cool. All right. So not as bad as I once feared. Big surprise. I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, no. But it's probably better. And like we said, this is early. This is not like the release version or anything. So we'll see how that all turns out. All right, let's take a break and thank the sponsor, and then we will get into, this is a hardware-heavy show from this point on out. We've got Matteo's Hardware Shack coming up next. But first, this episode of All About Android is brought to you by Streak. Now, as a startup founder, if you're a founder or entrepreneur, you know what it's like running your business from your inbox. So many people do, whether you're tracking sales, fundraising, hiring, maybe offering support. Streak is a CRM that will help you stay on top of all of your processes directly inside of Gmail. So it takes, you're already used to using Gmail. So why not bring your tools inside of it and use from there? Use Streak's free email tools to check if your emails have been opened. So you'll know if they've been opened. You can send bulk emails with automated follow-up emails to improve your response rates. Since Streak is built inside of Gmail, it's a part of your everyday workflow. So you can see details about your leads, your customers, your investors, all alongside your email where you already are. No more switching between Gmail and other tools. Whether you're prospecting for new customers, maybe you're raising a fundraising round, growing your team, or even managing, support tickets, you can use Streak pipelines to actually track all of your processes directly from Gmail. And getting started, super easy. You can set up your first pipeline in 2 minutes and customize each pipeline based on your needs from there. Streak makes it easy to collaborate by automatically sharing emails and notes with anyone on your team. And by the way, Streak was recognized as Google's Technology Partner of the Year. It's actually used by thousands of founders, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and it's so cool how it integrates in. That's what I think really sets this apart. If you're already using a tool for email that you like, for me it's Gmail, why not, instead of having to learn an entirely new system that's outside of that environment, why not bring it in there? And then you can benefit from the capabilities that you're already used to, but like on steroids. It really kind of amps it up, and that's what Streak really does here. Try out Streak today. It's free to use on your own, or you can use the Pro plan with your team. You can get 20% off your first year of their Pro plan, which happens to be their most popular option, by the way, by going to streak.com/AAA. That's STREAK, streak.com/AAA, and you'll get that 20% off. And we thank Streak for their support of All About Android. All right. Right now, we're going to hop into the shack. It's Matteo's Hardware Shack. Let's do it. Oh, it's been a while. Although I have to say, it's not been a while since we've seen that bumper, because every once in a while, Burke likes to troll Ron with it. So, and then that happens. Yeah, there it is. There it is. That one's a little bit harder to decipher for audio listeners because they think it's just the hardware bumper. But no, it's a goat-themed hardware bumper. So, Matteo, you've got 3 different devices that you told me about prior to the show, and we've got 15 solid minutes. That breaks down to about 5 minutes per device. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about these in particular, because at least a couple of these I've been really curious about. So, which one do you want to start with?
Let's start off with the one which would pretty much charge more than half the battery in the 15 minutes we've got to talk about
Wow.
3 phones. So that's the Xiaomi 11T Pro 5G. So
Nice.
the T series of Xiaomi devices are the ones which essentially are released 6 months after, or approximately half a year after, the original flagship series from Xiaomi. So the 11T Pro takes all the good bits of the 11 series flagship devices, makes a few cuts in terms of specifications, and then gives you a really capable smartphone at a very affordable price. So the 11T Pro 5G is a device which comes in at around about £650 sterling, which is less than $800. But it's a device that comes with a flagship Qualcomm chipset. It's the Snapdragon 888. Plenty of RAM and storage. In my case, I have 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. Sadly, there's no expandable storage. There's no Courage port or 3.5 millimeter audio jack. But what it does have is a curved glass back and a flat front screen with just some minor covers at the side. I really like this phone. I really liked its predecessor in 2020, the Xiaomi Mi 10T Pro 5G, when they still used the Mi branding, because you were getting, at the time, the flagship Qualcomm Snapdragon chipset, a no-nonsense physical design and ergonomically very usable, with a decent camera. Sadly, the 11T Pro 5G makes a bit of a cut there. You don't get optical image stabilization in the 50 megapixel sensor, but 108 megapixel sensor. It's one of the big ones. But overall, really good camera. It has an ultra-wide camera as well as a telephoto. So really great device all round with amazing battery life. So in my use, thanks to normal use and not going out and about much, I get a solid 2 days use out of this device. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which is quick charge, but I think it's ultra fast charging by Xiaomi's branding, which means it's 120 watt charging. That means you can fully charge this phone in 28 minutes from flat. So really impressive all-round device, very affordable. And if you can get it on a deal from a network or one of their flash sales that happen quite often around Europe and Asia, I would say jump on it. It is a fantastic device. And Xiaomi have been really good at updating their software recently. So MIUI, the Android distribution that Xiaomi have, is currently on Android 11, MIUI 12.5, but this will soon be updated to Android 13 or 12L, whatever the name will be, because Xiaomi is a One Handset Alliance partner, and Google have been working very closely with them. So the Xiaomi 11T Pro 5G, fantastic device. It's just let down a little. You don't get the full flagship experience because of that camera issue, in my view. Not having the optical image stabilization just makes it not good enough to compete with, for example, the Google Pixel 6 Pro or other devices in that price range.
And that's for stills that you're talking about, right? Because they call out on their site all of these like camera features that are designed, you know, they call it one-click AI cinema or whatever. At least that's the marketing that they have, kind of touting the fact that the video capabilities of this, along with their AI, can do some really cool cinematic things. That's different from what you're complaining about.
Yes, my complaints are about the stills. They're just not what I would expect of a device in this price category. Because of that 108 megapixel sensor, they crop, and the electronic image stabilization for video is very, very good. There's lots of great features within MIUI in terms of photo editing, but also video editing, and being able to do funny things like taking multiple video clips and merging them so that you can, for example, clone yourself and things like that. It's a really good video camera. I think that it's held back by the fact that it doesn't have expandable storage. So if you're wanting to create content and you're recording in 4K at 60 frames per second, you may be slightly limited in that. So it's a great all-round device. I think they had to make some trade-offs to bring the price down. I'm very happy with it. It's just not as good as other devices in the same price category, in my view. Especially when you have competition from a company like Realme, which is a sibling brand of Oppo, who have the Realme GT Neo 2. This is a slightly more affordable device. It comes in at around about 2/3 of the price of the Mi 11T Pro. And in terms of form factor, is very, very similar, but it has a little bit of a smaller screen. It's a little bit lighter. And instead of having the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 chipset, so the super flagship one, it has a Snapdragon 870 chipset, which is a slightly bigger transistor size. But for most users, unless you're going to be doing some serious video editing on it, it makes no difference at all. You get a great overall experience. So the GT2 Neo obviously is running Realme's own Android distribution, which is very similar to ColorOS from Oppo. It's a great overall experience. It's very close to the Google experience, but with some minor tweaks and a lot of extra features in terms of operating system applications and photo editing. In terms of camera, there is quite a big step down compared to the Xiaomi 11T Pro 5G. In this case, you're looking at a 64 megapixel camera with, again, no optical image stabilization. You also get an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, which I really like on this device. Sadly, they decided to put another sticker camera on it. It has a 2 megapixel macro camera, which I just can't get to work properly. Everything seems to be a bit fuzzy. Maybe it's just me, but I think these 2 megapixel macro cameras are pretty useless at this point. The Realme is a great overall experience for a smartphone and very affordable at around about £400. So you're getting a lot of smartphone here. Again, you get a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which if you're not going out and about a lot is a 2-day battery life, even with some gaming and games like Call of Duty Mobile or PUBG. So great overall smartphone. There's nothing to shout out about too much about it. It's just a really good experience for an affordable price. So Realme, I think, is an up-and-coming brand. They differentiate themselves from their parent company siblings like Vivo and Oppo with a bit of a targeting towards a more youthful and price-sensitive segment of the market. I think that over the next few years, we'll see them step in and take some market share that used to belong to, for example, Honor, Huawei's old brand, and potentially also Motorola. I think they're going to step into Motorola's more premium segment of the market, especially in places like South America. So we've covered these two. Let's go back to what is, I'm sure, in the US going to be a great success, as it is here in Europe. It's in the same price range as the Xiaomi 11T Pro. It is the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. So FE in Samsung's product portfolio stands for Fan Edition. Now, in late 2020, the Samsung released the S20 FE, which was a great smartphone. Essentially, it took the same formula that we were discussing earlier that Xiaomi uses. It 6 months after its main flagship, cuts a few corners, makes a very compelling package for a very affordable price for what you're getting. And
that was
again,
at the top of a lot of people's lists for last year, as far as the hardware was concerned, which is surprising for a device that was like literally designed to be a step down from the flagship, you know?
It is, because you get so much value from it, and they're cutting corners in all the right places. I quite like what Samsung call glastic. It's the plastic backs on these phones, because I'm less afraid to drop it. It's lighter, and it looks quite cool. This is the olive green version that I have. I really, really like the overall design. So you get something very similar to what you get on the S20 standard smartphone, but for a fraction of the price at launch. But it's important to remember that the S20 has been on the market for 6 months. You may already be able to get a deal on that flagship at a lower price than the S21 FE. The screen on the Samsung S21 FE is fantastic. It is a really punchy, nice AMOLED screen. On paper, it's pretty similar to the one we saw on the Xiaomi 11T Pro 5G. It's an AMOLED screen. It's 20:9 aspect ratio. It's full HD+. But the Samsung one is, in my experience, a much better rounded screen. It has punchier colors. It just feels like a nicer phone to use. It is also smaller, so it's a 6.4-inch screen at 20:9 aspect ratio, which makes it overall a nicer phone to hold, in my opinion. But that's a very subjective thing. If you want a bigger screen, a bigger phone, the Xiaomi might be the one to go for. But this S21 FE overall has a bit of a tighter, more put-together operating system with what is now One UI 4. But those of us who have been through the TouchWiz wars of early 2014 know that this is in reality One Wiz 4, or One Wiz 4, as I like to call it. It is Samsung's Android distribution. It has a lot of preloaded apps and services from Samsung. Samsung are obviously trying to get into the services market, and this is a very good device, which I think is a bit let down by Samsung's overbearing software, which really tries to sell you Samsung services. The screen is great. The battery life is very good, but in certain situations, I've found it to drain a little bit faster than its competition at this point in time. I just got the latest update to One UI 4. I'll see how that performs in the coming weeks, but we'll have a full review on the Tech Travel Geeks YouTube channel and a lot of extra videos focusing on the cameras, because Samsung have put a 12 megapixel camera in this device, which is very similar on paper to the one in the S20 FE. And I really want to compare the S20 FE to the S21 FE camera, because on paper they may look the same. I think there may be some differences in how the software handles images. I like the S20 FE so much, I gave it to my partner, Candice. She's using that phone at the moment, so I have easy access to it for doing some comparisons. Sadly, there's one thing that the S21 FE loses. That's expandable storage. That's usually a selling point for Samsung devices. With this one, we lose it.
Yeah. Yep. Goodbye. I mean, so many devices, that's one of those chopping block features that I feel like just gets cycled out year after year. We see less and less devices allowing for that. I was just doing some price comparisons. So the S21 on Samsung's site is $800. That gets you 128 gigs of storage. The S21 Fan Edition is $770, so $30 less. But you also get more storage on that, 256 gigs. If you had to pick between those two, the true, just the flatline S21 versus the S21 Fan Edition, which one would you pick?
I would definitely pick the S21 FE. It's a slightly newer device. I think it's ergonomically, it feels better to hold. Maybe it's the glass stick back. Maybe it's just the way it's shaped. I find it better to use than the S21. But that's a very personal opinion.
For sure.
I would say if you're shopping around for a phone and looking to decide, get a chance and go into a Samsung store, go into your carrier store, try and hold the device in your hand and get a feel for it, because it's amazing how little things can make a big difference. And always, as I recommend, make sure you have a case on them. Despite it being made out of plastic or glassstick, I recommend you have a case on it. And the case itself will change the ergonomics and the way you hold and use your phone. It's a very subtle thing, but I think it's important. And I'm an advocate for accessorizing your smartphones and, more importantly, supporting big Mokadile.
Yes, big Mokadile. This is the year. Big tech is out. Yes. Big Mokadile is in. So right on. Cool.
That's my hardware shack. It's a selection of 3 devices which aren't in the flagship category. It's the sub-flagship category, which I think is a really good value proposition. You get a lot for not a lot of money.
Yeah, indeed. Continually speaking, this has been the last 2 or 3 years that we've seen this kind of like middle range, the step down from the flagship, become incredibly competitive and just become something that's not a bad word, right? Like I feel like for so long, it's mid-range. Oh man, I would never want a mid-range, and now, I mean, man, the devices in this category, they do everything you would need a phone to do, right? But if you have the money and you're willing to kind of step up, you have that option too. It's just in a lot of ways, like it's totally unnecessary now. So really great stuff.
I totally agree. But in some markets, for some people, having the status symbol of the biggest, best thing out there, it's still an important factor. And I'm sure a lot of these brands recognize that. But the one they can make a lot more money on, as in better margins, is this sort of premium mid-range segment.
Yep, indeed. All right, well, our hardware talk is not over. Coming up next, we're going to go into a more traditional hardware block.
Thank you for the goats.
Traditional in the sense that you heard that music, but there's still goats involved. OnePlus 10 Pro, so it's getting some early hands-on attention. It is already available in China. No launch date still, at least here for the US and other markets. I don't know exactly when it's going to come out in other markets, but the OnePlus 10 Pro has been hitting the hands of some folks, including, MKBHD has put up a review and everything. Some of the things that they call out, very different design approach, as you saw from the image here, based on, compared to previous OnePlus flagship devices, has that kind of like wraparound camera module feel that the S21 kind of had, but it's definitely a larger module, goes deeper into the middle of the device. The in-display fingerprint sensor. So one of the big complaints on the previous series, Pro series, was that the sensor was too far down, and like ergonomics like that can get kind of annoying. I mean, eventually you get used to it, but apparently on this device, that sensor has moved up further into the body of the device. So hopefully makes it just a little bit easier to use. And then I also pointed out, a really ultra wide, like a super ultra wide fisheye lens, 150 degrees field of view, which sounds interesting from a creativity standpoint. So yeah, I'm curious, always curious about OnePlus's flagship devices. And by the way, I should also mention there's a report from 91 Mobile suggesting that the global version of the device might actually still ship with Oxygen OS 12 and not the unified OS, the Oxygen and Color OS unified OS, which has been very controversial. OnePlus is kind of transition into embracing Color OS instead of its Oxygen OS. So I don't know. How excited are you about the new things that OnePlus is up to? This new device. We've talked in last year at the end. I think the year-end show we talked about how kind of like the energy around OnePlus in the enthusiast category seems to have tapered off a little bit in the last year. Let's say year and a half. I'm curious to know what you think about the 10 Pro and how you feel about that.
The 10 Pro looks like a really interesting smartphone. I'm not sure how it's going to be priced in Europe and the US, but if it's priced at the right point, similar to what we saw with the Xiaomi 11T Pro, with the S21 FE, I'm sure it will do very, very well. OnePlus has built up its brand. It's made the deals with the carriers over the last few years. It's become more of a consumer recognized brand. Sadly, I think they've diluted their goodwill that they built up with the enthusiast communities. Their Nord series, and especially the low-end Nord devices, really dented, I think, their credibility, especially when it comes to software updates and security updates. I personally am very worried about that. Hopefully this Pro or 10 Pro series of devices will be well looked after in that respect. But if Oppo or anything to go by, I'm not so sure. I'm confident it will do well. I really like the look of that camera module and what they're doing with the cameras. They're doing something different again, which is always good to see. That wide fisheye lens is interesting to me. I wonder how many people who run the Airbnbs will get that phone just to make their place look bigger.
Yeah, no kidding. That's kind of like the perfect camera for something like that. But all joking aside, Hasselblad is a really big, important brand. Obviously, they were bought by a Chinese conglomerate a few years ago, and they now use Hasselblad branding on DJI drones, on OnePlus smartphones, and other smartphones. I'm not sure how much of actual Hasselblad is involved in this, or how much it is a marketing exercise. Similar to what we saw with Huawei and Leica a few years ago in the flagship Huawei smartphones. I'm sure there's some sort of collaboration. I'm not sure how deep it is. Maybe this is just sort of building that brand awareness, which especially in Southeast Asia and China, is very, very important. Having a premium brand like Hasselblad on your device suddenly makes it more attractive to a lot of people. But I'm sure that there's some collaboration going on. Not sure how much of it there and how much of it's just the sticker. Yeah, that's one of my big questions too. I mean, obviously with a camera, the most important thing is, okay, great. So this is a new camera system. It's got Hasselblad on it. How are the pictures? Like at the end of the day, does it improve the picture quality? Do pictures look better? And I mean, I remember being pretty happy with what pictures I got out of the OnePlus 9 Pro and the Hasselblad camera, tech embedded on that phone. But I wouldn't say that, like, at the end of the day, I was like, holy cow, this changes everything, One thing I will give the Hasselblad partnership, and it's probably the shallowest kind of compliment that you could give, like, a camera, an updated camera system on a phone, is that it looks really cool, right? Like, it's got a very kind of like, it has a certain aesthetic to it, the way that they're embedding these Hasselblad cameras into the device. So, if the pictures are a step up, they're a reasonable step up, and then it looks different, like with that Hasselblad lettering emblazoned on it, but then the camera kind of tech And I would probably say the camera tech on the 9 Pro kind of wowed me a little bit more than the looks of it on the 10 Pro. But that certainly does something for the OnePlus brand, right? To say like, oh, and they're doing some pretty cool things from a design perspective around the camera. But that doesn't go very far.
I think that the important thing here is if that unified operating system with ColorOS and collaboration within the parent company comes across, Vivo and more importantly Oppo have some really good chops when it comes to camera software and the computational photography side of things. I was really impressed with the Oppo Reno series of devices, which are a little bit more affordable, but took and still take really good pictures. So they're already good on there. If they can build on that, I'm sure we'll be pleasantly surprised by what the OnePlus 10 Pro can do. But until we actually get it in our hands and a few software updates after launch, we can't say for sure. Especially with this sort of uncertainty around the unified operating system, which is Hydrogen OS, the operating system for China, Oxygen OS, the one used globally outside of China, and whatever the unified one with color is, as in colored dihydrogen monoxide operating system. We'll see where that takes us. But I'm cautiously optimistic, but I don't want to commit to this just yet until I've got my hands on with it.
Yeah, indeed, and agreed. Well, what about this? Xiaomi launched an affordable Redmi Note 11 device. It's actually a series of devices, 3 different devices, the Note 11, the Redmi Note 11S, and the 11 Pro. I'm not going to rattle off all the specs of all of them, but essentially quad camera systems ranging from a 50 megapixel main to 108 megapixel main between the 3 devices. The system on a chip, ranging anywhere from a Snapdragon 680 on the lower end to a MediaTek Helio G96 to a Snapdragon 695, depending on which device you're getting. And then all devices ship. Unfortunately, they ship with Android 11 with no real word on what their plans are for Android 12. But pricing-wise, looking somewhere around the $179, $329, right in that range for these devices. So these are very affordable. Have you had much experience with the Redmi Note series, and what do you think about this?
Yes, the Redmi Note series is extremely popular in Asia and Europe. It is probably one of the fastest growing market segments for Xiaomi as they move into Europe. And for the last few years, I've been reviewing the Redmi Note series. Redmi is the sort of like budget, better value brand of the Xiaomi portfolio. It's Redmi by Xiaomi. And as I said, for the last few years, I've been reviewing their devices. Last year, the Redmi Note 10 was a fantastic device. Again, in that $150 price range, you got a lot of smartphone, a lot of a very fast charging battery, 33 watt charging, which at the time flagship phones had, and a gorgeous AMOLED screen. That's things that were unthinkable in that price category until recently. Mm-hmm. So Xiaomi have delivered on this. Our chief aperture officer, Lukash, has actually just had his Xiaomi Redmi Note 11 basic model delivered to him today, and he's currently filming our unboxing and first impressions video as I'm on All About Android. So that will be on Tech Travel Geeks soon. But the first impression he told me earlier was that the industrial design of this has changed drastically. It's a bit like the departure there was between the iPhone 11, which had curved edges, and the iPhone 12. It's gone sharp edges, and it feels significantly different. But again, you're in for $179. You're getting an AMOLED screen. You're getting a decent Snapdragon chipset that can play games and do everything everyone needs. And it's a very capable device, which is also expandable with microSD. So well done to Xiaomi, because bringing that sort of product to that price category is not an easy feat. And if it's anything like previous years, they have a winner on their hands, especially in times when there's a bit more uncertainty economically globally, and people are becoming more price sensitive. You don't need a super flagship. If a $179 smartphone can do 100% of what you need, why not go for one of those for a while?
That's crazy. $179 for an AMOLED 120 hertz display, for an 108 megapixel camera system, potentially. Although that one's probably going to cost a little bit more, right? I think your introductory $179 price is probably the 50 megapixel main. But even though, it's crazy the value that you get out of some of these phones. It kind of blows me away that you can spend that little and get that much.
It's why Xiaomi are growing so rapidly globally, is they've hit that sweet spot of value for money, and they know that they're going to make money on the ancillaries, so the accessories, but more importantly, the services on the smartphone. Xiaomi make a lot of money out of selling themes and ringtones. It's crazy how they operate.
Yeah,
and more importantly, it's crazy how many people spend money on smartphone themes.
That's true. That's just something that I'm not even clued into, but apparently they're making a killing off that too. Smart company. I wonder if someday they're going to bring that to the US.
Well, sadly, you can't get them at the moment, and they don't have any plans to come to the US just yet.
They never seem to.
But I like to think of smartphone themes as in it's software mockadile. That's essentially what it is.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And then finally, the Pixel 4a. Yes, this little guy right here, this little device right here. It feels so tiny. The mid-range device, if you remember, it was delayed when it was released, right? It came out in 2020. It was delayed to late summer, thanks to, I'll give you 3 guesses, but I'll tell you right now it's COVID, is no longer listed on the Google Store. This was the $350 kind of low-cost Pixel device that I thought was just a fantastic device. I mean, is still a fantastic device. I mean, the value, that you got out of these A-series devices has been just crazy, and this was kind of one of the best examples of it. And also, by the way, notable that it's the last A-series device to get a wide release, at least up until now. The 5A 5G that came out last year was limited to a handful of markets. This time, yes, related to COVID, but related to the supply chain, which is kind of also related to COVID. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure if you look around, you can still get the Pixel 4a if you would like to, and you're probably going to pay less than $350 for it. But you're not going to find it in the Google Store, not anymore. What did you think of the 4a?
I love the device. It was refreshing to have a relatively smaller device. But more importantly, to have the Google experience, and despite it only having one camera, it was the Pixel 12 megapixel camera with Google's computational photography. It is a fantastic device even to this day, and I really liked my Google Pixel 4a. I'm sad to see that particular device sunset, because I think that was the pinnacle of the square camera on the Pixel series. We had the Pixel 4, the Pixel 4 XL, were a bit of a wobble. They weren't great products in hindsight. The Pixel 4a took that industrial design, packaged everything up nicely in the mid-range, and I think opened up the Pixel market to a lot of people. People who previously wouldn't have considered a Pixel smartphone were introduced to the Pixel 4a. They bought one, they got on board, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that in the years to come, people who had a Pixel 4a will upgrade to another Pixel phone. That's probably circling back to what we were saying at the beginning of the show, why Google has had a really good fourth quarter with the Pixel sales. This is the knock-on effect of the 3A series and the 4A doing so well, in my view.
That's a really good point, right? Someone gets their introduction into the Pixel family at this low-cost device a couple of years ago. Now we're 2 years later. The device, people are starting to feel like, okay, I'm ready to upgrade, and they're already exposed to the Pixel aesthetic. Yeah, I think there's probably something to that. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
And within the enthusiast or developer side of things, a lot of people I know, and I did this myself, the Pixel 4a was where I was running the developer previews of Android 12 over the summer. This was my test device to see what things looked like on Android 12. And it's a perfect test device because you know that this is not going to be your main phone, so you can put it down when you've finished your work. But it still gives you access to that developer preview before any other device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. Well, all right then. So that's our hardware-heavy double feature. Up next, we're going to take some of your emails. We're going to read some of your emails. AAA@twit.tv, 347-SHOW-AAA. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do that, or send us an email. Like all three of today's feedback emails were done. Ryan wrote in to say, hey, yo, AAA. I was listening to material with Flo and friend of the show, Andy Anatko. We need to have Andy back. They were not loving the presumed name of the folding Pixel, the Pixel Notepad. I agree, and think I have a better name for the device. How about, drumroll please, the Megapixel? Who wouldn't want a Megapixel? I'd much rather have a Megapixel than a Notepad. What do you think? I think that's a cool application of the name. Sure, why not? It's cheeky. There we go. But I mean, it's probably true, right? Like it would be the megaist of pixels if the foldable device came out with that name. What do you think?
Definitely. I really like the idea of a megapixel. I think, obviously, I'm a bit of a silly person, so I'll take this a step further. And with a bit of license or unlicensed use of Juan Carlos Bagnell's brand, I would call it Megapickle. Especially if it's a rollable version of the Pixel smartphone instead of a foldable. It could be pickle shaped. So it could actually be shaped like a pickle. And just think of the amazing cases you'll be able to buy on AliExpress for your mega pickle smartphone.
So, yeah, that's what we need. We don't just need foldable devices. We need total redesign of design entirely. Yeah, tasteable design. This is what we need in smartphones. We need smartphones that every once in a while when we're hungry, we can eat them. And yes. You never know when you're going to be stranded somewhere and you need to eat your phone. And if it tastes like a pickle, then maybe it's a good idea. It's probably a horrible idea actually, but I like it.
I'm cautiously optimistic about a future where instead of having a foldable phone that is just a slab that folds in two, we walk around with rolls, a bit like the Romans used to walk around with scrolls under their arm.
Yes, right.
It's a proper scroll, and then you have a massive screen that you can interact with if needed, or if not, it's just a nice little roll with a very different user interface.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see how this rollable screen technology works out.
Yes, the Android scroll. Could happen. Probably not, but could happen. Yannick from Montreal wrote in to say, on the January 18th episode, you mentioned that the Android 12L beta was a limited beta that had to be downloaded and flashed. He says, I was signed up for the Android 12 beta on my Pixel 4a and thought I was done when the official release came out. But to my surprise, my phone came up with the 12L beta. I decided to install, thinking it would not change much on my regular-sized phone. The first beta of 12L was somewhat buggy with lock screen elements in wrong positions and occasional Bluetooth issues when I switched playback from one app to another. Killing all apps usually resolves the issue. The second beta is better in terms of layout, but still has the Bluetooth issues. I'm pretty sure that getting off the beta track at this time would require a phone reset, so I'm staying on until the final 12L is out, then making sure I get off the beta program to get some stability back. I wonder if I really should have been offered it after your comments about its limited distribution. And I do remember, Yannick, that when we were talking about 12L, like I tried to make that point apparent, but maybe I didn't drive it home, that if you stay on the beta track, you would continue to opt into the beta for 12L. I also, wasn't aware of how buggy it would have been. I actually haven't checked out 12L. This is kind of one of the first beta versions that I haven't really participated in because I've been trying to just get comfortable with 12 as it is. Maybe I'll opt in on the next version, prior to release, but I don't know. Have you checked out 12L at all?
No, I haven't. I'm going through a very gentle transition from the Google Pixel 5 to the Google Pixel 6 Pro. And that's mainly because I really like the smaller form factors, such as the Google Pixel 4a and the 5. And I'm still getting used to the curved screen on the Pixel 6 Pro and the bigger screen. So I'm sticking with production. I'm sticking with the actual release, but from what I've heard from friends who are on 12L, it's not ready for your main phone. So I'm in a lucky position where I have more than one device, and if I wanted to, I could run it on a separate one. I always recommend, if you want to check out the latest version of Android, don't do it with your main phone, especially because sometimes things like emergency calls may not always work, and more importantly, critical apps like email or two-factor authentication can break down.
At the end of the day, it's a beta. And it's a beta that's really designed for developers to make sure their apps are working, to find bugs, right? The software is just really not, the beta software is just really not designed to be a daily driver for any random person. Even though, I will fully admit, like, I still hop on that train, partially because I feel like doing this show, like I want to be exposed to all the things. And sometimes I'm fine with rolling the dice. I'm like, you know what? This might totally hose my daily driver, but that'll be part of the story, and roll the dice and see how it goes. Not recommending that to anybody else. I make sure that I'm protected and backed up and everything when I do that. But so yeah, don't ever opt into the beta and just assume everything is going to be perfect and work, flawlessly, because that's just not how it works. Expect bugs.
I would say that's very sound advice, but I will also have to say that those of us who've been around for a while have been a bit spoilt by Google, because how long was Gmail in beta when it was essentially a finished product? There's a lot of betas out there which are essentially perfectly good for daily use, but potentially could have issues. Whereas with these Android developer previews and beta channels, I think that's much more wobbly. Yeah, indeed.
Wobbly indeed. All right, and finally, we are at the portion of our show where we anoint the email of the week. Yes. It feels good to be the email of the week, is what Scott the Geek is saying to himself right now. Scott, you wrote in and said, I think you need to keep in mind a fundamental aspect of any folding phone. And by the way, Scott is referring to a conversation that we had, I believe, on last week's show, just about the kind of like the inherent design of foldable phones, how cool it is, but they take up a lot of space in your pocket. And we were just kind of talking through that randomly. It says, although the manufacturer can put the circuit board inside one side and the battery inside the other, no matter how you do it, once the phone is folded, that total thickness must contain 2 layers of display and 2 layers of backing material, just the nature of any material once folded. The only 2 options you are then left with are either A, a very thick end product, the current state of things, or B, a device that feels normal thickness folded, but once unfolded is dangerously thin and fragile. And weren't you simultaneously complaining in this episode how easy it is to break phones even at their current thickness? One way around this is to ditch folding and do more with unrolling, as we've seen in a few concept models. But no doubt, we're going to continue to see manufacturers stubbornly pursue folding devices, which inevitably will suffer from problem A or problem B because they have to. Good on you for pointing that out, Scott. And I agree, right? Like physically, there's only so much that we can do to, like we've talked many times on the phone about this like mythical sci-fi device that I think maybe Ron saw on The Expanse, or I can't remember which show it was that he always refers to. That's like a plate of glass,
It's
a
The
translucent. Is it The Expanse?
Or Westworld. It's Westworld too.
Or Westworld,
Yeah,
right. And I mean, if science fiction tells us anything, it's that given a long enough time horizon, we'll probably get to a point where we're able to realize that to some degree. But we're definitely not there right now, not with current technology. And I don't know what it's going to take to get there. So we're left with dealing with today's physics problems, based on the materials that we're using right now. So there really is no way to have your cake and eat it too. What do you think about that, Matteo? What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. So I'm a big fan of the idea of scrolls or rollable screens. The inspiration I've had recently, whilst I was moving home and doing a lot of DIY, is your tape measures. If you think about how they roll and how they're sort of semi-rigid in use, if you could just have a wider version of a tape measure with your smartphone in it, I think that would be a great user paradigm. That gives you then the option to widen it or close it as much as needed. So if you just need a narrow phone to make phone calls, you can do that. But if you need a big tablet, you can roll it out even further. So hopefully that's where technology goes.
And hopefully you can roll back up a lot slower.
Well, I don't know. That
measure?
could be a whole part. Yeah, that's part of the fun,
You mean-
isn't it? Spring loaded.
Yeah, you don't want it to just slap right back and cut your hand in the process and slap your face. That's true. That's very true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
That's just my off the rails thoughts after having played and pretended that my tape measure is a lightsaber.
Haven't we all? Have you ever cut yourself with a tape measure? Had it like go back really fast? And I've had it. Basically, it amounts to like a paper cut, but it's like a tape measure cut.
It's not
like
fun.
It just, the friction of it just goes. Oh man, that is painful. Yeah, not fun. Don't want that from a phone.
I learned that as a kid. Now I'm a bit more careful, but still, it is a lightsaber.
Yes, it is really. Let's just cut to the chase. It actually is one. So don't add us. Thank you, Scott, so much for emailing in to AAA@twit.tv and being our email of the week. You are awesome. Scott,
Well done,
the Geek,
Scott.
email of the week.
I need to see if Scott the Geek is in any way related to Tech Travel Geeks. It seems we have a similar final word.
The last name is the same, so you're all descendants from the same family tree, the same technology tree. So I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised at all. All right, well, we've reached the end of this episode of All About Android. And Matteo, it is always awesome to get you on the show, and I'm really happy that I got to kind of hang out with you solo for a change. It was great to have you on today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure being on. And thanks to Victor and Burke and the whole team for making the goats happen. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah, of course. They wouldn't miss the opportunity, to be honest. It's Ron who might try and sabotage that, but he's not here today, so he couldn't do it. So this is the opportunity that you have to kind of let people know what you're working on. You've kind of talked about it a little bit, but Tech Travel Geeks, what do you want people to know?
Yeah, so Tech Travel Geeks, it's myself and our Chief Aperture Officer, Lukash. We cover consumer electronics, gadgets, apps, services that we think make the travel experience better. Technology does make travel better, and we think that all these gadgets and things are worthy of coverage on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/techtravelgeeks, all one word. So, yeah, we do a lot of smartphone coverage. Travel is involves a lot of communication nowadays. Having access to the internet and translation tools on your smartphones really does make travel better if you're lucky enough to do that at the moment. And we look forward to how this is going to evolve in the years to come. So it's great to be in a lucky position where we can do this sort of coverage, and we've got an awesome audience which is growing, and it's surprising how well we've done in less than 4 years at this point. So we're really enjoying the interaction with the audience. But as always, I'm a great listener of Twit's shows, and also I subscribe to the Club Twit, which is a great service, especially for that Discord chat functionality.
You're doing my job for me. Thank you, Matteo. I appreciate it.
But yeah, I'm a net promoter of Club Twit as hopefully one of the first people to have signed up.
Yeah, nearly one of the first. That's true. Well, thank you, Matteo. Always a pleasure. We will get you back soon with the rest of the crew. One of these days coming up here. Totally. Oh, well, yeah, we might as well just say real quick, since Matteo mentioned it, Club Twit, twit.tv/Club Twit. Ad-free subscription tier, of course, so all of our shows with no ads, including this one. You wouldn't hear this ad if you were a member of Club Twit. You also get an exclusive Twit Plus podcast feed, which we put a bunch of extra content in there. Ant Pruitt is killing it as kind of the community manager. He's doing all sorts of AMAs and extra content. We've got extra shows that are appearing there first. So yeah, a lot to look forward to there. And then, of course, the Discord that Matteo mentioned, which is just a whole, bucket of fun. There's always a lot of people in there pitching in, and it's just a good time. So $7 per month, twit.tv/Club Twit. Big thanks to Victor for making the show happen behind the scenes and publishing it. Big thanks to Burke, who's at the studio, making the show happen in the first place. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell, or, all over the Twit network. In fact, tomorrow, February 2nd, I am filling in for Leo, who is away in Carmel on a much-needed vacation. So I'll be filling in on This Week in Google. So we'll talk more about Google tomorrow afternoon. And then, of course, Thursdays I do Tech News Weekly with Micah Sargent. So look for that. I also want to mention real quick, it is Twit audience survey time. We do this at the beginning of every year. It's just an opportunity for you as a Twit listener or viewer to kind of share as much or as little as you want to about what we're doing, who you are. This isn't the kind of thing where we're tracking you or anything. This is all completely optional. And it's ultimately so that we can make your listening experience better than it already is. We want to give you exactly what you're looking for. And so, whatever you can share, we appreciate it. It only takes a few minutes. Go to twit.tv/survey22. twit.tv/survey22. And we appreciate when you do that. Thank you so much. But that is it for this week's episode. Things will return more normal next week. Win is back. Ron is still out. He's taking a couple of weeks off. So good on Ron. So you won't see him next week, but it'll be me and Win, and we might even have a guest along with us. We publish every Tuesday evening at twit.tv/AAA. So go there, subscribe, and you won't miss a single episode anymore. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on All About Android. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Did you spend a lot of money on your brand new smartphone, and then you look at the pictures on Facebook or Instagram and you're like, what in the world happened to that photo? Yes, you have. I know. It happens to all of us. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands On Photography, where I'm going to walk you through simple tips and tricks that are going to help make you get the most out of your smartphone camera or your DSLR or mirrorless, whatever you have. And those shots are going to look so much better. I promise you. So make sure you're tuned in to twit.tv/hop for Hands On Photography to find out more.